Around 320 million years ago, the planet was ruled by insects that dwarfed every modern relative. Massive, dragonfly-like creatures filled the skies, their wings broader than many birds, while dense forests hosted enormous centipedes, hefty scorpions, and other bizarre beasts. A warm climate, lush vegetation, and a high oxygen level let these animals grow to astonishing sizes. This era predated the dinosaurs. Insects were among the most successful forms of life on land and in the air. Their fossils offer a window into a world of exotic giants, dramatic environmental shifts, and the early stages of life that eventually shaped the ecosystems we know today. By the time these gigantic insects appeared, Earth had already endured countless transformations that reshaped its crust, atmosphere, seas, and resident organisms. The early world looked nothing like today. There were no humans, birds, flowering plants, mammals, or dinosaurs. Volcanic eruptions spewed vast amounts of gases, creating an atmosphere rich in carbon dioxide, water vapor, methane, ammonia, and nitrogen, with little or no free oxygen. Consequently, the sky's composition differed sharply from the modern one. As the planet slowly cooled, molten rock solidified into crust, rain fell for extended periods, and water pooled in lowlands, forming the first oceans. Rivers carried this water across the land, feeding growing seas. These oceans became the cradle for the earliest life forms. Scientists agree that the simplest organisms arose in water because it offered a more stable environment than the harsh, sun-baked, temperature-fluctuating land. The earliest life consisted of microscopic entities detectable only with specialized equipment. They lacked bones, shells, or complex body parts, reproduced, and gradually spread throughout the seas. Some derived energy from dissolved chemicals. Others later mastered photosynthesis, converting sunlight into food and releasing oxygen as a byproduct. This oxygen slowly altered the atmosphere, though much of it initially reacted with iron and other substances in the oceans and rocks. After millions of years, increasing amounts of free oxygen began to accumulate in the air. The rise in atmospheric oxygen dramatically reshaped the planet. Many primitive organisms that could not tolerate oxygen-rich conditions vanished, while new, more efficient life forms emerged, exploiting the newfound oxygen to extract energy from food. This surge in oxygen also set the stage for further pivotal changes high above Earth's surface. Oxygen molecules linked together to create ozone, and a protective ozone layer formed high in the atmosphere. It blocked much of the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation, giving living things a better shield and increasing their chances of eventually moving onto land, even though the terrestrial transition happened much later. For a long time, almost all life stayed in the oceans. Tiny organisms drifted with currents or lived on the sea floor. Over millions of years, some of them grew more complex. Individual cells grouped into larger assemblies, forming creatures with distinct body parts that each performed a specific task. This made life far more varied. The seas gradually filled with many different forms. The first animals were soft-bodied, and later some developed hard outer shells or simple skeletons that protected them and supported their bodies. Small marine creatures crawled along the bottom, swam through the water column, or burrowed into mud. As diversity increased, new ways of feeding appeared. At the same time, the planet's surface was changing. Massive rock slabs, known as tectonic plates, moved slowly across the globe. Though the motion was gradual, over millions of years it reshaped continents and oceans, land masses joined, split, and shifted to new positions. Where plates collided, mountains rose. Where one slid beneath another, deep oceanic trenches formed. Volcanoes continued to spew gases and bring fresh rock to the surface. The evolving landscape influenced the climate. Rain eroded mountains, carrying rock fragments into rivers that delivered sediment to the seas. Wind swept loose soil across dry regions, and waves slowly altered coastlines. These forces acted day after day for countless generations, steadily remodeling the Earth. Climate swung between warmer and colder periods, sometimes covering parts of the planet with ice, and other times keeping it largely warm. Volcanic activity, plate movements, atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, and the arrangement of land and sea all played roles, forcing living organisms to adapt or disappear. Long before giant insects appeared, plants had not yet covered the land. Continents were mostly bare rock, loose soil, and sand. Rivers cut through empty valleys, and strong winds swept the open spaces. The early land surface looked nothing like the forested world that would come later. The first terrestrial pioneers were tiny organisms. Some bacteria and simple algae colonized damp spots, coating wet stones and leaf surfaces. Their communities gradually broke down rock into finer particles, creating thin layers of soil. Fungi also became crucial, decomposing dead material and returning nutrients to the environment. Certain fungi formed close partnerships with the early plants, helping them absorb water and minerals, while receiving food produced through photosynthesis. These early land plants were extremely simple. They lacked flowers, seeds, and deep roots, and they could only reproduce where water was present, so they clung to moist spots near rivers, swamps, and wet soils. Their small, ground-hugging bodies spread across these damp areas, and their roots began to hold the soil in place. When the plants died, their remains built up a layer of organic matter that gradually enriched the ground, making it easier for later plants to take hold. Over time, the bare rocks gave way to a thin green carpet. Soon, tiny animals followed onto the land. Most of them descended from creatures that had lived in the oceans and now faced the challenge of breathing air, staying moist, finding food, and reproducing away from water. Natural selection favored those whose traits helped them survive on dry ground. The first successful terrestrial animals were the ancestors of today's arthropods, early insects, spiders, scorpions, and other hard-shelled, joint-legged forms. Their waterproof exoskeletons limited water loss, sturdy legs let them move, and their small size meant they needed little food. At first, they remained minute, living among the simple plants, damp soil, and leaf litter, feeding on dead organic material, fungi, or microscopic organisms. Some evolved into predators of even smaller prey. As plants grew more diverse, animal food webs became increasingly intricate. Throughout the vast epochs, the atmosphere also shifted. Oxygen levels rose very slowly as plants constantly produced it through photosynthesis, rising and falling over time because of plant growth and decay, fires, volcanic activity, and other natural processes. In the early stages of land colonization, forests were scarce. Most vegetation stayed low and primitive. Later, groups with stronger stems and efficient internal water transport systems appeared, allowing plants to grow taller and farther from permanent water sources. These taller plants created new habitats. Leaves offered food, stems provided shelter, and the cooler, moisture-retaining soil beneath them supported richer organic layers where tiny animals could hide. the environment grew ever more fertile, sustaining a growing variety of life. Meanwhile, ocean life continued to evolve. Fish diversified, some developing jaws for catching prey, others strengthening fins for better swimming. Coral communities offered refuge to countless marine creatures, and larvae, worms, and other small organisms spread throughout the seas. Over countless ages, marine ecosystems became increasingly complex. Some fish gradually strengthened their fins, allowing them to move more confidently in shallow waters. In swampy areas where water depth shifted with the seasons, this gave them a clear edge. Over many generations, a few fish developed traits that later helped some of their descendants venture onto land. This transition unfolded through countless tiny modifications rather than a sudden metamorphosis. As plants spread, the once barren land turned greener. Simple, moss-like forms were joined by taller species with basic stems, and eventually vascular tissues appeared, transporting water and nutrients far more efficiently. Those innovations let plants grow much larger, reshaping landscapes across the globe. When plants died, their remains sank into swamps where water slowed decay. Year after year, thick layers of organic matter accumulated, turning into peat in some places. Buried, compressed, and heated over millions of years, that peat became coal. Ancient coal seams preserve clues about the environment that existed before the rise of gigantic insects. The expanding vegetation also altered the atmosphere. Plants pulled carbon dioxide from the air and released oxygen, gradually shifting the balance of gases. Although many factors influenced atmospheric composition, the spread of plant cover played a decisive role in creating conditions that later supported diverse animal life. Early insects were still minor players on land. Their ancestors were only beginning to develop key features that would eventually enable them to inhabit a wide range of habitats. The first winged forms appeared much later, opening new possibilities for feeding, escaping predators, finding mates, and colonizing new territories. Vast stretches of continents were dominated by wetlands. Rivers frequently overflowed, forming bogs and small ponds. In these damp settings, plants thrived. Fallen branches littered the ground, and decaying leaves fed fungi. The moist soil provided ideal niches for tiny arthropods and other simple terrestrial animals, and these zones later became crucial centers for insect evolution. Continental drift continued slowly, spawning new mountain ranges while eroding old ones. Sea levels rose and fell, and climate, together with tectonic forces, reshaped ocean basins. Over millions of years, coastlines advanced inland and then retreated, each shift forging new habitats that organisms either adapted to or left behind. Thus, long before giant insects roamed the earth, the air, land, oceans, climate, plants, and animals were in constant flux. As forests expanded, the conditions for massive insects slowly emerged, with oxygen levels changing and early arthropods increasingly exploiting the greening world. The Carboniferous period began about 359 million years ago and ended around 299 million years ago. It became one of the most crucial chapters in Earth's history because the land, oceans, and atmosphere underwent massive changes. Over millions of years, enormous forests spread across much of the globe. The air contained far more oxygen than today, about 35% compared with the current 21%. So plants released huge amounts of it, while dead vegetation was buried and turned into coal. This high oxygen level kept rising for a long time, shaping the life that thrived then. The Carboniferous created the conditions for giant insects, which roamed forests, swamps, rivers, and low-lying wetlands. Their size still amazes scientists because modern insects are tiny in comparison. Insects breathe through tiny side holes linked to a network of thin tubes. This system works well for small bodies, but becomes inefficient as size grows. The abundant oxygen of the period made it easier to deliver oxygen throughout a larger body, allowing some species to reach gigantic proportions. At the start of the Carboniferous, continents drifted slowly over huge underlying plates. Many land areas sat near the equator, enjoying warm climates and heavy rainfall. Large rivers cut across the continents, filling broad basins that turned into swamps and marshes. The flat terrain and constant rain kept water from draining away quickly, so dense vegetation covered almost the entire surface, forming some of the planet's biggest forests. These forests looked nothing like today's. Flowering plants had not yet appeared. The land was dominated by towering lycopsids, ferns, seed ferns, and early trees. Some lycopsid trunks rose over 30 meters high, and giant horsetails reached impressive heights as well. Ferns carpeted the forest floor and filled open spaces with thick green foliage, creating dense canopies that let little sunlight reach the ground. Fallen leaves, broken branches, and dead plants accumulated in the damp soil, forming thick layers. The wet, raw soil slowed decomposition, so much of the plant material remained buried under water and mud. Over millions of years, heat and pressure transformed these remains into the coal deposits that give the period its name. The rocks formed then still hold vast stores of carbon locked in coal, many of today's coal seams stemming from that ancient era. The atmosphere of the Carboniferous differed markedly from today's. Scientists estimate that at certain times oxygen made up about 35% of the air. The massive forests pumped out colossal amounts of oxygen through photosynthesis, while a large share of carbon from dead plants stayed buried instead of returning to the atmosphere, allowing oxygen levels to stay high. This elevated oxygen concentration had a pronounced effect on insects, whose breathing system benefits from richer air, enabling some to grow far larger than any modern counterpart. Another factor that helped giant insects thrive was the absence of flying birds. Birds had not yet evolved, so the skies were free of agile aerial predators, giving large insects fewer threats and more ecological opportunities. Large flying insects faced far fewer threats while hunting for food or mates. Though other animals did prey on insects, the tiny aerial predators of the time were much less numerous than those that would appear millions of years later. One of the most famous insects from the Carboniferous was Meganeura. Its wingspan stretched to roughly 75 centimeters, making it one of the biggest flying insects ever recorded. Meganeura possessed a long body, powerful wings, and huge compound eyes that helped it locate prey. It skimmed over rivers, lakes, and swamps teeming with small creatures, hunting other insects and tiny animals by snapping them up with spiny, robust legs. Once caught, the victim was torn apart by a strong mouth apparatus. The insect relied almost entirely on its extraordinary vision. Its eyes were composed of thousands of tiny lenses that together detected motion, allowing it to spot prey mid-flight. High speed and sudden direction changes let it intercept fleeing targets. Scientists think Meganeura spent much of its life near fresh water because its larvae probably developed in water before maturing into adults. Young relatives of Meganeura differed markedly from the adults. They lived underwater, hunting tiny organisms, and shed their external covering repeatedly as they grew. Eventually, they emerged onto plants protruding above the water surface, where the final layer broke away, revealing an adult with soft wings that hardened over time. After a brief rest, the new adult would take to the surrounding forest. Meganeura was not the only giant arthropod of that era. Another remarkable creature was Arthropleura. Though not an insect, it was closely related to millipedes and ranked among the largest terrestrial invertebrates ever. Some individuals exceeded 2.5 meters in length. Its body consisted of many linked segments protected by a hard outer shell, and countless legs carried it across the forest floor. Researchers believe Arthropleura fed mainly on decaying plant matter, fallen leaves, and other organic debris. Fossil trackways show it moved through soft, waterlogged ground and swampy woods, likely searching for food within thick layers of rotting vegetation. The abundant forest litter provided ample sustenance. The Carboniferous forests hosted a dazzling array of giant insects. Massive dragonflies, ancient grasshoppers, crickets, and early beetle ancestors filled the skies and undergrowth. Some species fed on plants, others hunted small animals, and many decomposed dead material on the forest floor. These swampy woodlands supported extraordinary biodiversity because a relatively small area contained many different habitats. Tall trees formed a high canopy that captured much of the sunlight, while low-lying plants, water bodies, streams, fallen trunks, and leaf-covered banks offered countless niches. Each layer supplied food and shelter for its inhabitants. Throughout most of the Carboniferous, warm climates persisted across many regions, fostering this rich and varied ecosystem. Heavy rains filled the rivers and kept the swamps wet. Thick forests held moisture in the soil, letting water spread slowly across the landscape and creating ideal conditions for plants to thrive. Because insects depended on those plants directly or indirectly, the forests supported enormous insect populations. Rapid reproduction caused their numbers to climb quickly, with many species laying huge clutches of eggs. When food was abundant, the young grew fast, and different life stage habits reduced competition. Juveniles and adults often ate different things or lived in separate habitats, allowing more individuals to survive. A hard outer shell gave insects vital protection, supporting their bodies, limiting water loss, and providing a sturdy anchor for muscles. Strong legs let many species climb vegetation, burrow into soft earth, or seize prey, while wings opened new possibilities, letting them travel great distances, escape danger, and find mates. Not all Carboniferous animals were insects. Early amphibians flourished along rivers, ponds, and marshes, some growing large enough to hunt fish or small land creatures. At the same time, the first true reptiles appeared. Unlike amphibians, they laid eggs with protective shells and could reproduce away from water, a key innovation that let them colonize new environments. Forests also hosted spiders, scorpions, and other ancestors of modern arachnids. Some hunted insects by hiding under plants or inside fallen trunks. Others waited motionless for prey to approach, adding further richness to the Carboniferous ecosystem. The seas were teeming with fish, cephalopods, mollusks, and other marine life. Warm, shallow waters fostered coral communities, while sea lilies carpeted the seafloor, filtering tiny food particles from the water. Although giant insects dominated the land, ocean conditions remained tied to the planet's overall climate. Seasonal changes affected every region, even though most of the world stayed warm. In some areas, flood periods gave way to lower water levels. Rivers shifted course, creating new wetlands while abandoning old ones. Forests gradually moved into fresh habitats, bringing insects and other animals along. Most of what scientists know about Carboniferous insects comes from fossils. Their remains are found in rocks formed from ancient river channels, lake deposits, and swamp sediments. Some fossils preserve wing veins in fine detail,
Others show whole bodies with legs, eyes, mouths, and body segments.
Trackways and footprints reveal how individual animals moved across the ground. Researchers examine these finds with modern technology, high-resolution images, precise measurements, and scanning equipment to see structures invisible to the naked eye. By comparing fossils from different sites, they track how species spread across the continent and evolved over time. Discoveries of giant insects amazed early paleontologists, since modern relatives rarely reach such sizes. The more gigantic fossils were uncovered, the stronger the proof became that enormous insects once roamed the Carboniferous world. Whole wings of Meganeura, massive arthropod body fragments, and other remains showed that the atmosphere then supported creatures far larger than their modern relatives. Researchers still ask why later insects shrank. A chief factor was the gradual fall in atmospheric oxygen after the Carboniferous ended. Climate shifts, the spread of forests, and the appearance of new predators also played roles. As ecosystems changed, truly huge insects grew rarer, while smaller forms proved better suited to the new conditions. The Carboniferous was marked by major geological activity. Slow continental drift and collisions raised mountain ranges, which altered rainfall patterns, river networks, and local climates. Some swamps vanished, new ones formed elsewhere, and over millions of years, these changes dictated where plants and animals could survive. Forests captured vast amounts of carbon from the air. When dead plants were buried before fully decomposing, much of that carbon stayed locked beneath the soil. This long-term sequestration shaped the climate for eons. Eventually, the accumulated plant matter turned into thick coal seams, remaining underground until humans began mining them millions of years later. Different plants dominated distinct forest niches. In the wettest spots, lycophytes prevailed, while slightly drier ground hosted seed ferns. Giant horsetails lined streams and ponds, their strong roots stabilizing the soil and their dense foliage creating cool, damp, shaded microhabitats ideal for moisture-loving insects. Many insects relied directly on plants for food. Some chewed leaves, stems, or spores. Others fed on decaying plant debris on the forest floor. Predatory insects depended on these herbivores, forming a complex food web that allowed numerous species to coexist in a single forest. Even today, rocks formed in the Carboniferous continue to yield valuable clues about ancient life. Each fossil adds a piece to Earth's distant history and reveals the remarkable world in which giant insects flourished. The composition of Earth's air has not been constant. Over the planet's long history, the mix of atmospheric gases has varied many times. There were eras with far less oxygen than today, and periods with much more. One of the most significant high oxygen intervals occurred during the Carboniferous, when oxygen reached about 35%, well above the current 21%. Such a level profoundly affected plants, animals, insects, forests, rivers, swamps, and countless natural processes that shaped life on land. This rise began long before the Carboniferous. For countless millions of years, the planet slowly evolved. Volcanoes spewed gases into the sky, oceans formed, continents drifted, and the simplest life forms appeared. In the planet's earliest atmosphere, there was hardly any oxygen that animals could breathe. The air was filled with gases rising from deep inside the Earth. Over time, tiny organisms learned to use sunlight to make food, and as a side effect, they released oxygen. At first, this oxygen didn't stay in the sky. It quickly reacted with iron and many other substances in the oceans and on land. Those chemical reactions used up huge amounts of oxygen, so it never built up in the air. As more and more of the tiny organisms kept producing oxygen, the materials that could bind it became saturated. After many millions of years, oxygen finally began to accumulate in the atmosphere. The rise was not rapid. It took an enormous stretch of Earth's history, with each new generation of microbes adding a little more oxygen than the one before. Gradually, the air grew richer in oxygen, opening the way for more complex life. By the start of the Carboniferous period, plants had taken hold of much of the land. Early forms were small and simple, but they grew larger and more elaborate as time passed. Roots dug deeper, stems rose higher, and they captured sunlight more efficiently. Vast forests spread across warm, wet continents, especially where frequent rains fed rivers and fresh water. For most of the Carboniferous, the climate favored the expansion of these woods. Swamps formed on huge, low-lying areas. Water lingered there, keeping the ground soft and the dead plant material submerged long enough to avoid drying out. In these swampy forests, ferns, giant club mosses, horsetails, seed ferns, and other ancient plants filled the landscape with thick greenery and tall trunks. Through photosynthesis, they took in carbon dioxide and gave off oxygen. A single leaf contributed only a tiny amount, but together the endless canopy released massive volumes of oxygen day after day. The amount of oxygen in the air depended not just on how much was produced, but also on how much was consumed. Decomposing dead plants and animals, tiny microbes, fungi, fire, and chemical reactions with rocks all used up oxygen. In the Carboniferous, the balance tipped toward high oxygen levels because the sprawling forests generated it faster than the massive amounts of dead plant matter could be broken down. Instead of being completely broken down by bacteria and fungi, a large portion of plant debris became buried under silt, sand, and water. While underground, the carbon locked inside the plants could not return to the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, so the oxygen that the plants had released during growth stayed in the air. This burial of plant matter is a key reason why oxygen levels kept rising. Each year, the coal-forming forests produced enormous amounts of plant material. Leaves fell into swamps, branches snapped, and after storms or floods, whole trees often crashed into the water. Thick layers of dead vegetation accumulated on the wet ground. Because the waterlogged soils lacked oxygen, bacterial decay was slow, much slower than on dry land. While new layers continued to pile up, the weight of the deposits increased pressure on the older material. Over very long periods, heat and pressure gradually turned these layers into massive coal seams. Many of the coal deposits mined today originated from those ancient forests. By keeping carbon locked underground, coal formation prevented its return to the atmosphere and allowed oxygen to keep building up. Another factor was the organisms that decompose wood. Modern fungi break down wood quickly, but during the Carboniferous, most organisms could not efficiently digest lignin, the substance that gives wood its strength. Consequently, large volumes of wood persisted and decayed slowly, storing carbon beneath the surface. Dead trunks often lay in swamps for long periods, many becoming buried before fully decomposing, which further increased the amount of carbon removed from the air. Continental movements also created favorable conditions for widespread forests. Much of the land lay near the equator, receiving abundant sunlight and regular rainfall, which produced extensive wetlands. Warm climates promoted plant growth for most of the year, allowing these vast forests to generate oxygen with few interruptions.
Throughout the period, sea levels rose and fell, with shallow seas advancing onto land and later retreating, shaping the environments where these processes unfolded. Water fluctuations constantly created fresh wetlands, and plants rushed to colonize them. Each new swamp became a place where massive stands of vegetation could grow, die, and eventually be buried. As forests spread, they sucked enormous amounts of carbon dioxide from the air, gradually lowering the gas's concentration and altering the climate in various ways. Even as CO2 fell, photosynthesis kept pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and locking it into plant tissue while releasing oxygen. Because we cannot measure the air that existed hundreds of millions of years ago, scientists reconstruct ancient oxygen levels from indirect clues. Ancient soils hold minerals that form only at specific oxygen amounts. The chemistry of certain rocks records atmospheric shifts over time. Coal seams reveal how much plant material was buried, and fossil charcoal shows that fires were common when oxygen was abundant. High oxygen makes fire ignite and spread more easily. Researchers also examine tiny bubbles trapped in old rocks, study the chemical forms of sulfur and carbon, and run computer models that blend geology, chemistry, biology, and climate data. All these approaches repeatedly indicate that during the Carboniferous period, the atmosphere contained exceptionally high oxygen. Such an oxygen-rich air had profound effects on living things. Air-breathing animals inhaled more oxygen with each breath, making it easier for cells to obtain what they needed. For many groups, this meant changes in growth rates, activity levels, and survival odds. Insects were especially affected. They breathe through small side openings called spiracles, and air travels through a network of tubes that delivers oxygen directly to tissues. This system works well for tiny insects, but as body size increases, the distance oxygen must travel grows, reducing efficiency. High atmospheric oxygen, however, speeds diffusion through those tubes, allowing insects to reach sizes far beyond what they could achieve under lower oxygen conditions.
That helped sustain some of the largest insects ever recorded, giant relatives of millipedes, centipedes, cockroaches, and other invertebrates. Oxygen wasn't the sole cause of their size, but it was a crucial factor. Plants also responded to the favorable conditions. Ample sunlight, abundant water, and warm temperatures let forests keep expanding. Each growing season added fresh leaves, stems, roots, and trunks, while older plants died and were replaced. This endless cycle maintained vigorous photosynthesis across vast areas. In the swamps, organic matter piled up year after year. Water slowed oxygen's penetration into the soil, making deep decomposition difficult, so dead plant material lingered longer than in dry forests. The buried carbon continued to feed the atmospheric oxygen cycle. Large rivers that crossed these lowlands regularly dumped fresh sediment into the swamps, burying fallen plants beneath new layers of silt. Each burial episode protected a bit more organic material from complete decay. Over immense stretches of time, repeated burial built thick coal seams that are still exposed in many parts of the world today. Oxygen levels rose gradually, not instantly, but over millions of years. Every generation of forests added more oxygen than it consumed because massive amounts of carbon stayed locked underground. This slow yet steady process produced one of the highest atmospheric oxygen concentrations in Earth's history. As oxygen increased, fires became more common in some areas since drier plant matter ignited more easily. Charcoal preserved in the rock record shows that these coal forest fires did occur. After a blaze, vegetation typically regenerated and the cycle began anew. Young trees absorbed carbon dioxide, released oxygen, and added fresh plant material that later became buried. Various plant groups contributed.
Giant lycopsids formed dense stands in many swamps, while horsetails grew tall where conditions allowed. Ferns carpeted the damp soil, and seed ferns added further diversity. All performed photosynthesis, enriching the atmosphere with oxygen and storing carbon in roots, stems, and leaves. Over millions of years, their combined growth created a massive biological system that continuously reshaped Earth's air composition. Oceans played a supporting role. Marine plants and microscopic organisms also released oxygen through photosynthesis.
Although coal-age terrestrial forests were the primary drivers of carbon sequestration, the oceanic biosphere remained a steady oxygen source. Together, land and sea vegetation ensured the gradual buildup of the atmosphere that defined this remarkable era. Around 320 million years ago, the planet looked nothing like today. Endless forests of giant lycopsids, towering horsetails, seed ferns, and countless other ancient plants covered the land, thriving in warm, humid conditions. Rivers meandered slowly, broad wetlands filled low-lying areas, and thick layers of fallen leaves and dead plants accumulated, later transforming into the coal seams we now mine. Early animals lived among these plants. Amphibians and early reptiles lingered near water, while predators stalked the underbrush. Millipedes scurried through leaf litter, and insects filled the air and foliage. Some insects grew to sizes unimaginable today, a result of a long evolutionary history that began hundreds of millions of years earlier. Insects belong to the arthropod group, characterized by hard exoskeletons, segmented bodies, and jointed limbs. Long before insects appeared, oceans were already teeming with diverse arthropods. Some of the earliest arthropods were so tiny that they could be seen only under close inspection, while others grew much larger. Over millions of years, different lineages developed new body shapes and ways of living. Some stayed in water, but others gradually adapted to land. Leaving the water was difficult. The animals needed protection against drying, stronger legs to support their bodies out of water, and a way to breathe air instead of extracting oxygen from water. Through countless generations, early terrestrial arthropods acquired these traits. A hard outer shell helped retain moisture, and their jointed legs became sturdier, allowing movement over stones, mud, fallen leaves, and soil. Their respiratory system changed, with air entering through a tiny opening and traveling through tubes directly to the tissues. Among these early land-dwelling arthropods were the ancestors of insects. The first forms were far simpler than modern insects, lacking many later features. They clung to the ground, hiding under dead plants, in cracks, and in damp soil. Their diet consisted of tiny plant fragments, fungi, other organic matter, and occasionally small, live prey. Small size was an advantage. It required fewer resources and made it easier to evade predators. As plants spread across the continents, new habitats opened up for insects. Each new type of vegetation offered fresh opportunities. Leaves provided food, stems and dead wood gave shelter, and the cool, moist soil beneath dense foliage supported growing populations. Different groups gradually evolved specializations to thrive in varied environments. Some became better at digging, others excelled at climbing, and some refined their mouthparts to exploit new foods. Over long epochs, these changes produced a great diversity of insect species. A pivotal moment in insect evolution was the emergence of wings. Scientists still debate how the first wings appeared, because the earliest stages left few fossils. One hypothesis suggests that wings evolved from flat body extensions that initially helped insects control movement during jumps or falls. Another proposes that they derived from respiratory structures or other body parts that later became adapted for flight. Whatever the pathway, wings represented a major transformation. The earliest wings likely did not enable full flight. They may have allowed short glides or better control when landing after a fall. Even this limited ability gave insects a significant edge: safer travel between branches, easier escape from danger, and fewer fatal drops onto predator-filled ground. Natural selection favored those with slightly more effective wings, and over innumerable generations, the wings grew larger, stronger, and more efficient. Mastery of flight opened previously inaccessible niches, letting insects cross streams, reach distant plants, and find mates over broader areas, ultimately speeding up the search for food and the avoidance of foes. Flying insects with advanced wing structures spread across many habitats and kept evolving, creating a huge variety of winged bugs. During the late Paleozoic, the atmosphere was rich in oxygen, much higher than today. Scientists link this to the vast, endless forests that covered the land. Through photosynthesis, these plants took in massive amounts of carbon dioxide and released oxygen. When plants died, their remains often sank into wet swamps, where they decomposed only partially, locking away large carbon stores and keeping atmospheric oxygen elevated for a long time. This high oxygen environment affected many organisms. Insects breathe through tiny openings that lead to a network of tubes called tracheae, delivering oxygen directly to their tissues. This system works well for small creatures, but its efficiency drops as size grows. With abundant oxygen, it could reach deeper parts of larger bodies, allowing some insects to grow far bigger than those living now. Still, oxygen alone didn't cause gigantism. A mix of factors did. Expansive forests provided plenty of food and shelter, a humid climate reduced drying risk, and vegetation remained lush year-round. Few predators could catch big airborne insects. Birds hadn't appeared yet, and flying reptiles emerged much later. Such conditions let large winged insects thrive and diversify over many generations. Natural selection gradually favored individuals with slightly larger bodies, stronger wings, better muscles, and sharper eyesight. Those traits boosted survival and reproduction, and over countless generations they accumulated, producing some truly massive species. The most famous of these giants were the Meganeurids, often mistaken for modern dragonflies because of their similar look, though they belong to an entirely extinct group. Some had wingspans exceeding 60 centimeters. Their long bodies, broad wings, and huge compound eyes made them skilled hunters of the ancient sky. Two robust wing pairs attached near the mid-body were reinforced by a network of veins that kept the wings light yet strong. Precise wing control let them dart, ascend, descend, and even hover briefly while scouting for prey. Their massive compound eyes, composed of thousands of tiny lenses, offered a wide field of view and keen motion detection, essential for catching other insects in flight. Their mouthparts were built for seizing and crushing prey, with powerful jaws breaking the bodies of smaller bugs. The legs of these ancient winged insects could snatch prey from the air or from branches, while sharp spines helped secure the catch. Once trapped, the mouthparts tore the victim apart, leaving only the parts easy to consume. The muscles that powered the wings made up a large portion of the mid-body and, working with the wings, enabled rapid flight. Flying demanded huge energy, but the abundance of insects in Carboniferous forests supplied enough food for these active predators. The forests themselves formed a complex habitat with countless niches for flying insects. Tall vegetation created multiple layers. Sunlight reached the canopy, while the lower levels stayed dark and damp. Streams, ponds, and swamps added further environments. Insects moved through this three-dimensional space in search of food, mates, and suitable places to lay eggs. The life cycles of many early flying insects likely resembled those of modern mayflies and related groups. Although complete fossil records of every stage are rare, eggs were probably deposited near water or in moist settings. Juvenile stages developed under favorable conditions before maturing into winged adults. As they grew, muscles strengthened, eyes enlarged, and wings fully formed, allowing sustained flight. Our main knowledge of these creatures comes from fossils. Typically, an insect became fossilized when its body sank into fine mud or sediment before fully decaying, allowing minerals to replace or preserve delicate structures over long periods. Some specimens show wings with astonishing detail, their vein patterns revealing species distinctions. Others retain the shape of the body, mouth parts, legs, and even muscle impressions. Fossil-bearing rocks have been found worldwide, and each new discovery broadens our view of early flying forms. Sizes ranged from tiny to gigantic, illustrating the remarkable diversity of Carboniferous and early Permian insects. Studying these fossils requires meticulous work. Scientists examine samples under powerful microscopes, photograph minute details, and compare wing venation with known taxa. Modern imaging methods can reveal hidden internal structures without damaging valuable specimens, deepening our understanding of ancient insect life and evolution. During the Carboniferous, many insect groups adopted varied body plans. Some became herbivores, others hunters of small animals. Some stayed near water, while others spent most of their time in forest crowns. Flight allowed them to spread over vast distances and occupy niches inaccessible to ground-bound animals. Natural selection fine-tuned every body part. Vein arrangements reinforced wings without adding weight. Sensory organs improved detection of food, danger, and mates. And body coloration likely served as camouflage or communication, though original colors rarely survive fossilization. As they proliferated through the dense forests, these large flying insects emerged as key predators within their ecosystems. They kept the numbers of tiny insects and other minute creatures in check, while at the same time they served as food for large amphibians and early reptiles. Their presence was a crucial link in the swamp forest ecosystems of the late Paleozoic, helping maintain high oxygen levels, warm climates, and extensive wetlands that supported their success for millions of years. Long before humans appeared, the Earth was home to many life forms unlike any we see today. One of the most striking was Meganeura, a gigantic flying insect that lived in the Carboniferous, when vast forests of towering plants, ferns, horsetails, and other vegetation covered the land. The atmosphere then was rich in oxygen, allowing insects to grow to sizes unimaginable now. Meganeura lived about 300 million years ago, near the end of the Carboniferous. Fossils discovered in Europe, primarily in what is now France and England, include fragments of wings, bodies, and other parts that let scientists reconstruct its appearance and habits. The name Meganeura means large veins, referring to the dense network of veins that reinforced its wings, much like the strong, veined wings of modern dragonflies.
Its wingspan reached roughly 70 centimeters, and some specimens suggest even larger individuals, placing Meganeura among the biggest known flying insects. The wings were long, broad, transparent, and supported by a sturdy framework that prevented damage in flight. The body was elongated and slender, topped with a pair of huge compound eyes composed of thousands of tiny lenses, giving the insect a wide, acute field of view essential for spotting prey and evading danger. Unlike many insects that rely heavily on long antennae, Meganeura's antennae were short. It depended mainly on its vision. Its mouth housed powerful jaws capable of grasping and chewing other animals, holding struggling prey until it could be torn apart and swallowed. The oral apparatus of the Meganeura was perfectly suited to an active predator. Its wings were lined with tiny spines that helped it hold on to prey while flying. When it approached another insect, the Meganeura seized the victim with its legs and brought it to its mouth. Some spines allowed it to cling to branches and other resting spots, but they were not adapted for long walking on the ground. Most of its active life was spent in the air or resting on vegetation. Powerful internal muscles drove its wing beats, demanding huge energy from such a large insect.
Strong muscles attached to the inner walls of its body gave it precise control over each flap, letting the Meganeura move through the forest in search of food. The exact speed of its flight is unknown because no living specimens remain, yet scientists view the Meganeura as an active flyer for which staying airborne was far from cheap. Carbon coal forests provided an ideal home. Vast, swampy woods covered much of the land, keeping the soil moist and surrounding the area with countless rivers, ponds, and marshes. Dense vegetation offered insects endless places to hide, feed, and reproduce. Fallen trees, rotting plants, and stagnant water sustained a rich diversity of life, attracting countless insects that supplied the Meganeura with abundant prey. The climate of the era was warm and humid. Frequent rains nurtured massive forests that stretched for great distances. Plant life was abundant and varied. Towering lycopsids rose high, tree-like ferns spread wide leaves across the forest floor, and thick stands of horsetails and seed ferns added further variety. These forests generated huge amounts of plant material, which, after burial and long-term transformation, turned into coal. During the Carboniferous, atmospheric oxygen was higher than today, about 35% compared to the current 21%. This high oxygen level was crucial for insects, which breathe through tiny side openings called spiracles. Air enters the tracheal tubes, delivering oxygen directly to tissues. Because insects lack lungs, this system works best when oxygen is abundant, allowing large species like the Meganeura to fully oxygenate their bodies. The lush forests also offered protection. In thick vegetation, the Meganeura could rest and hide between hunting flights, finding shelter from strong winds. The watery environments attracted many small insects, giving the Meganeura ample feeding opportunities throughout the day. It hunted other insects that inhabited the forests and swamps. The Carboniferous hosted a multitude of ancient insects, some related to modern mayflies, others belonging to groups that have since vanished. The forests were filled with cockroach relatives, early grasshoppers, and many other winged insects. Small flying insects formed an important part of the Meganeura's diet. While patrolling ponds, streams, marshes, and open forest patches, its large eyes constantly scanned for movement. Spotting prey, the Meganeura would swiftly change direction and dive toward its target. Spiked feet reached forward, snatching an insect before it could flee, while powerful jaws ripped the prey apart. Researchers believe Meganeura hunted mainly in daylight, when its huge compound eyes gave it the best vision. Sharp sight allowed the insect to judge distance, direction, and speed while flying,
reducing the chance of missing a target or colliding with an obstacle. Although Meganeura was the top insect predator, a variety of other creatures shared its environment. Early amphibians inhabited the rivers and swamps. The first reptiles were beginning to explore land, and forests were home to large spiders, giant centipedes, and numerous other arthropods, each occupying its own niche in the Carboniferous ecosystem. Its life cycle likely resembled that of modern dragonflies. Females probably laid eggs in fresh water or along its edge. After hatching, the young nymphs lived underwater, looking very different from adults. Lacking fully developed wings, they preyed on tiny aquatic animals and insect larvae. As they grew, they shed their outer skin repeatedly, each molt allowing the body to enlarge until full maturity. When ready, the mature nymph climbed out of the water onto a stem, stone, or other solid surface. The outer shell cracked, and the adult emerged slowly, its soft wings unfurling as body fluids filled them. Once the wings hardened and the body strengthened, the insect took its first flight over the swamp-surrounded forests. Adult Meganeura spent most of its life hunting, evading danger, seeking mates, and reproducing. Males may have defended small, prey-rich territories, while females searched for suitable freshwater sites to lay eggs. Scientists reconstruct these stages by comparing Meganeura to living odonates and by studying fossilized remains. Despite living hundreds of millions of years ago, their development followed a clear sequence from egg to adult, much as modern insects do. Each new fossil detail adds to the picture of how these extraordinary creatures grew, found partners, and left offspring in a world that looked very different from today. The largest insects thrived during the Carboniferous period, roughly 350 to 300 million years ago. Vast forests covered the land, and a richer atmosphere allowed insects to reach sizes unseen today.
In these dense habitats, forests, swamps, rivers, and ponds, giant relatives of dragonflies, massive centipedes, large cockroach-like insects, and countless other arthropods lived, all beginning their lives as eggs. The female carefully chose the spot where her eggs had the best chance of surviving. The exact place depended on the species. Some insects laid their eggs on plants, others buried them in soft soil, wet mud, or decaying plant material. The dragonfly relatives most likely deposited theirs in fresh water or right beside it, because their early larvae needed a watery environment. Each egg was shielded by a tough outer shell. That shell kept moisture from escaping and protected the developing creature from harsh conditions. Inside, a tiny body began to form. Cells divided and turned into legs, eyes, a mouthparts, and internal organs. This development continued step by step until the young was ready to hatch. How long the egg stayed hidden varied. Warm weather usually sped up growth, while adequate humidity was also important. Too much dryness or cold slowed development, and sometimes the eggs paused until conditions improved. When the right habitat and food appeared, the young insect emerged. What the hatchling looked like depended on its species. Some resembled miniature adults but were wingless and much smaller. Others bore little resemblance to the form they would later assume. Scientists think many large dragonfly ancestors underwent an incomplete transformation. Their larvae, called nymphs, kept the general shape of the adult, lived in water, and lacked fully formed wings. Nymphs spent most of their time hunting for food. They had to eat often because rapid growth required a lot of energy. Their bodies were covered by a hard exoskeleton that could not stretch, so they had to shed it repeatedly. This process is called molting. Before each molt, a new, still soft exoskeleton formed beneath the old one. When the new layer was ready, the old shell cracked and the insect slowly slipped out. The fresh exoskeleton was initially soft and flexible,
so the insect usually hid in a safe place while it expanded and took shape. After a short time, the new shell hardened and the insect returned to normal activity. Every molt marked another growth stage. By shedding the old cover, the insect became larger. Legs grew longer, the body strengthened, internal organs continued to develop, and wing buds became more noticeable in young dragonfly relatives.
With each successive molt, those tiny wing structures expanded until the adult stage arrived. The period right after shedding was among the most dangerous moments in the insect's life. While the new exoskeleton was still soft, defense was weaker than usual. The insect moved cautiously and often stayed hidden until the shell fully hardened. Predators that spotted it at this time could take advantage of its vulnerability. Large dragonfly relatives spent a considerable part of their lives in water. Streams, ponds, swamps, and slow-moving rivers offered them places to grow and hunt. Even before reaching adulthood, these aquatic nymphs were active predators, feeding on other small organisms in their watery homes. They fed on tiny water dwellers, small insects, crustaceans, worms, tadpoles, and anything else that fit their jaws. The mouthparts of young predators were perfectly built for snatching prey. Modern dragonfly nymphs have a specialized lower lip that shoots out in an instant, grabbing whatever comes close. Researchers think ancient relatives possessed a similar structure, letting them seize a victim before it could escape. As the nymph grew, it could tackle larger prey. Powerful jaws crushed or sliced the food into pieces easy to swallow. Digestion took place inside the body, and the released nutrients were used to build muscles, nerves, wings, and other tissues needed for further growth. Breathing was equally vital. Aquatic nymphs extracted oxygen from the water. Different insect groups evolved various methods, some developing internal organs that absorbed dissolved oxygen directly. While the water stayed rich in oxygen, the youngsters could remain active beneath the surface. The underwater world offered many opportunities, but also many threats. Large fish, amphibians, and other predators hunted in the same ponds. Young dragonflies had to find food while avoiding becoming food themselves. Staying motionless among submerged plants, hiding under fallen leaves, or resting on the bottom helped them stay unseen. Each molt brought the body closer to its final adult shape. Wing buds enlarged, muscles strengthened, and reproductive organs began to form. Hormones controlled these internal changes, and natural chemical signals timed each molt. The last molt was especially crucial. The nymph shed its final immature exoskeleton and emerged as a fully formed adult. For giant dragonfly relatives, this usually happened after the nymph crawled out of the water onto a stem, a fallen branch, or a riverbank rock. The outer shell cracked open, and the insect slowly freed itself. Immediately after emergence, the wings were soft and folded. A thin film of water seeped into the wing veins, allowing them to expand to full size. The insect waited for the wings to harden before attempting flight. Rushing the first flight could damage the delicate wings, which were not yet able to support the body's weight. Once the wings solidified, a completely new life began. The adult could now fly over forests, marshes, and open fields, searching for food and mates. Flight greatly enlarged the area it could explore. Instead of a single pond, a mature dragonfly might visit dozens of different sites during its lifetime. Adult giant dragonflies became master hunters. Their large compound eyes, made of thousands of tiny facets, gave them a wide field of view and quick detection of moving prey. Strong legs formed a basket that snatched insects in midair before the powerful jaws took them. Even after reaching adulthood, food remained essential. Energy was needed for sustained flight, hunting, evading predators, and reproducing.
Rich nutrition improved the chances of successful mating and egg production, especially for females who required abundant resources to create healthy eggs stocked with reserves for the developing larvae. Reproduction began once males and females reached sexual maturity. They looked for members of their own species using visual cues, movements, and sometimes chemical signals. Insects recognize suitable partners by body size, motion, wing shape, color patterns, and behavior. Courtship varies among groups. Some males guard territories where females might appear, while others roam large areas until they meet a potential mate. The ability to fly is crucial because many encounters happen in the air. Competition among males likely existed. The first to reach a female usually had a better chance to pass on his genes. Larger size, strength, skilled flight, and good health all increased the odds of successful breeding. During copulation, the male transferred sperm, which the female stored until she was ready to fertilize her eggs, usually inside her body before laying them. This protected the embryos at the earliest stage. After mating, the female carefully chose a site for laying her eggs.
The choice was vital, since the hatchlings would depend entirely on the surrounding water, food, temperature, and protection from predators. Many females laid large numbers of eggs because only a few larvae survived to adulthood. Disease, predators, weather changes, floods, droughts, and food shortages reduced the number that completed the life cycle. So a big clutch raised the likelihood that enough offspring would survive. While the adults continued to live, the eggs developed unnoticed. Inside each tiny embryo, legs, eyes, muscles, nerves, digestive organs, and other body parts formed. When development reached the appropriate stage, the larva broke through its shell and began the cycle anew. As it grew, its body became better suited to the environment. Each stage brought small but important changes that improved survival. After every molt, muscles grew stronger, giving better control of movement. Legs hardened, allowing climbing, crawling, swimming, and clinging to plants. The mouth parts enlarged and hardened, expanding the range of food the growing animal could eat. The digestive system also became more efficient. Food was broken down, nutrients absorbed, and waste expelled. This continual loop of feeding, digestion, absorption, and waste removal lasted throughout the insect's life. The circulatory system supported growth by moving nutrients and oxygen around the body. Insects have an open circulatory system, not a closed network like mammals. A dorsal tube acting as a heart slowly pumped fluid through internal cavities, delivering nutrients to growing tissues and helping remove metabolic waste. Together with the respiratory organs, this system kept the body functioning during rapid growth. As the insect matured, its nervous system also developed. The brain and nerve cords control movement, feeding, balance, and reactions to danger. Young insects gain experience through repeated situations. They don't learn like humans, but constant interaction with their surroundings shapes their behavior. When an individual successfully escapes a predator or finds food in a particular setting, it is likely to repeat those actions under similar conditions. As they near adulthood, vision becomes increasingly vital. Compound eyes keep adding facets, sharpening the ability to detect motion. This acute eyesight lets large flying insects spot prey from a distance and react instantly. Even the slightest movement helps them locate food while avoiding threats. Simple eyes gauge light levels, distinguishing day from night. Other senses play key roles too. Fine hairs on the body sense air or water currents, warning of an approaching animal before contact. Antennae detect chemical cues, guiding insects to food, suitable habitats, and later, mates. Maturing insects gradually shift to different parts of their environment. The youngest stay in sheltered, food-rich spots with fewer predators.
As they grow stronger, they venture into open areas where food is abundant, reducing competition between age groups sharing the same region. Seasonal changes also influence development. Warm periods speed growth because higher temperatures accelerate bodily processes and food is plentiful. Cold periods slow growth. Many insects enter dormancy to conserve energy when food is scarce or temperatures drop. Rainfall dramatically affects water-dwelling species. Healthy ponds, marshes, and streams support rich communities that larvae depend on. Heavy rains create new water bodies and expand habitats, while prolonged droughts shrink them, crowding insects and limiting food. Plants support insect life cycles even without being directly eaten. Dense foliage offers shelter from predators and weather. Leaves and stems provide safe resting places. Decaying plant matter in water creates refuges for young aquatic fauna. Roots stabilize banks, creating suitable sites for eggs and developing larvae. Environmental quality is crucial. Clean, oxygen-rich water promotes healthy growth, whereas polluted water with abundant decaying organic matter reduces oxygen, making survival harder and slowing development. Insects from cleaner habitats typically reach adulthood in better condition. Development speed varies among species and even within a single group, depending on food availability, temperature, and encountered dangers. In some insects, adulthood arrived early because they grew steadily in favorable surroundings. Others took longer. Recurring hardships slowed their development. During the growth years, injuries were common. Legs or antennae could be broken by predators or by rough terrain. Young insects often repaired the damage in later molts. If a leg was lost early, a smaller but functional replacement could appear after subsequent molts. Once the final adult form was reached, this ability almost vanished as molting ceased. Giant insects also faced illnesses and parasites.
Some individuals likely contracted fungi, bacteria, or microscopic parasites. Internal parasites entered through contaminated food or water, while external ones attached to the exoskeleton. Well-fed, healthy insects usually resisted infection better than weakened ones living in harsh conditions. The body allocated energy carefully. In early stages, most of the energy went to growth, building larger muscles, stronger wings, and developing reproductive organs required a constant supply of nutrients. After reaching adulthood, a larger share of energy shifted to reproduction. Adults still needed food, but producing eggs or sperm became a primary task. Fully functional reproductive organs appeared only after the last molt. In males, structures that generated and transferred sperm became active. In females, ovaries gradually formed mature eggs packed with nutrients that would sustain the embryos. Finding a mate often meant traveling long distances. Adult giants of the Strykos lineage likely spent hours soaring over rivers, ponds, and forest clearings where their kind gathered. Good weather boosted activity, whereas heavy rain, strong winds, or unusual cold limited mating opportunities. Successful reproduction required precise timing. Males and females had to reach adulthood around the same period to meet. If one sex matured much earlier, the chances for pairing dropped. Natural selection favored life cycles that synchronized the breeding season within each species. The condition of adults also mattered. Those that had abundant food as juveniles entered adulthood with stronger bodies and larger energy reserves. Well-nourished females usually laid more healthy eggs, and males with robust flight muscles and overall vigor more often found partners and reproduced successfully. Egg formation demanded substantial nutrition. Each developing egg contained substances that would support the embryo after fertilization. Females continued feeding after mating to gather enough resources for the clutch.
As the eggs matured inside the body, they gradually moved toward the organs that would deposit them in suitable sites. The ancient world was a constant bustle. Creatures searched for food, fled danger, defended their homes, and fought daily for survival. Across land, water, and air, animals lived that relied on other organisms for nourishment. Some predators chased healthy prey, while others stalked the weak, wounded, or dead.
Every day brought fresh dangers, and every creature had to stay alert. No spot stayed safe for long because the drive to eat, grow, and reproduce ruled all life. Giant insects, early amphibians, ancient fish, and countless other forms shared the Carboniferous world, each meeting its own trials. Vast forests of towering horsetails, club mosses, and seed ferns blanketed the land. The thick canopy created dark, damp hideouts for insects and other small animals. Moist soil, slow-moving streams, ponds, and expansive swamps supported endless life. But rich habitats also drew hunters. Wherever food appeared, predators soon followed. Many insects nibbled leaves, soft plant tissue, spores, seeds, dead vegetation, and any organic matter they could find. They searched the litter or climbed stems and branches for fresh greens, but while feeding, they were exposed. Predators lurked among the foliage, waiting for an insect to come close. Some hunters relied on speed, others on sudden surprise. A single careless move could land an insect in an ambush. Large flyers, such as Meganeura, were among the era's top aerial hunters. Their massive wings let them zip through warm air above forests and swamps, and huge eyes spotted movement from every direction. Once a target was seen, they closed the gap in an instant, leaving tiny, flying insects with almost no chance to escape. Many of those insects dove into dense vegetation or slipped through narrow leaf gaps, but success was far from guaranteed. Flying insects developed several tricks to lower their risk. Some hid during particular times of day, others stayed close to thick greenery, avoiding open spaces. When danger was sensed, many froze and waited silently. A rapid reaction often decided whether they fled or became a meal. Hunting also raged on the forest floor. Numerous predators scoured fallen leaves, broken branches, and moist earth. Large centipedes roamed dark patches, hunting insects, amphibians, and other small creatures. Their many legs helped them cross uneven ground, and powerful jaws held struggling prey, making escape difficult. Early spiders played a key role too. Some waited patiently for prey to approach, while others actively explored plants and soil. Their success hinged on careful, concealed movements, and any small insect within reach became their next bite. Scorpions were ubiquitous in these ancient woods, hiding under fallen wood, in cracks, and among thick plant debris. Insects that crossed their paths rarely survived. In the water, dangers matched those on land. Ancient fish hunted each other in rivers, lakes, swamps, and shallow coastal waters. In the water, some creatures relied on powerful jaws, while others depended on swift, sudden strikes. Small fish often formed schools, hoping that chaotic movement would lower the chance of any single individual being caught. Yet predators regularly broke into these groups and snatched prey. Along riverbanks and ponds, larger amphibians waited almost motionlessly until another animal entered their reach. Then, with surprising speed, they lunged forward, their mouths seizing insects, fish, and smaller amphibians. The youngest and most cautious individuals faced constant threats from bigger residents of the same habitat. Life for a juvenile was far harsher than for an adult. Eggs attracted countless hungry beings searching for easy meals. Newly hatched insects and young amphibians were tiny, weak, and barely able to defend themselves.
so many never survived to adulthood because predators found them before they could grow strong. Daily life was further complicated by competition. Animals fought not only against predators, but also against members of their own and other species for food, space, shelter, and breeding sites. Rich feeding grounds drew many hungry creatures, and even when resources were abundant, they had to forage carefully because others coveted the same supplies. Among herbivorous insects, competition peaked when fresh vegetation appeared. Tender leaves offered valuable nutrients for growth, causing swarms to gather on single plants and quickly deplete the available food. When a patch became crowded, insects moved to new forest areas, exposing themselves to unfamiliar dangers and new predators. Successful hunting spots attracted numerous hunters. If several predators patrolled the same airspace, each captured less prey, and every missed strike meant wasted energy without sufficient nourishment. Some individuals retreated to quieter zones, while others persisted despite lower success rates. Territorial defense grew increasingly vital. Good hunting grounds, safe resting spots, and suitable breeding areas were highly prized. Animals often chased away intruders, reducing competition and boosting their chances of finding enough food and protecting their offspring. Weather added further challenges. Although many regions remained warm, conditions still shifted.
Heavy rains flooded forests, covering nesting sites and forcing relocations. Strong winds hampered flying insects, and droughts lowered water levels, concentrating animals and making them easier targets for predators. Seasonal changes altered plant growth, food stores, and breeding cycles, prompting migrations that heightened exposure to danger. Diseases and injuries also posed serious threats. Even a minor wound could impair movement, hunting, or escape, further endangering survival. A broken wing and a hurt leg made it hard for a creature to fly or crawl, turning it into easy prey. When insects molt, they shed their old shell and grow a larger one, but the new covering stays soft for a while, leaving them poorly protected. Predators often snatch these freshly molted insects, so finding shelter during the molt dramatically raises survival chances. Reproducing takes time, energy, and careful site selection. Adults look for spots where newly hatched larvae can start feeding right away. Some choose plants already bearing food. Others lay eggs near water because the young develop there. Picking the wrong place sharply cuts the next generation's survival. Male insects sometimes fight directly for mates. Strong flight, a healthy body, and a well-defended territory boost a male's odds of passing on his genes. Those who fail to find a partner leave no offspring. Over generations, natural selection favors the structures and behaviors that best support survival and reproduction in the prevailing environment. Predator numbers also hinge on successful breeding. Young hunters need time to learn. Early attempts usually end in failure and lost prey. With experience, they gauge distance, speed, and movement better, and seasoned adults hunt far more effectively after years of practice. Forests are in constant flux. Plants grow, die, and fall, opening light gaps that invite new vegetation, which in turn draws insects and the predators that follow them. Fallen logs give small animals shelter while simultaneously becoming hunting grounds for larger predators that explore the rotting wood. Decaying matter fuels countless microbes, which break down dead leaves and trunks. Tiny insects feed on this material and become vital food for higher-level hunters. Each forest layer sustains its own web of life, all interlinked. A shift in one group ripples through many others. Water quality matters too. Oxygen-rich streams support healthy fish and amphibians, whereas stagnant water harms them. Floods transport plants, silt, and animals to new locations, creating both opportunities and threats that require rapid adaptation. Young and old forests host distinct communities. Dense foliage hides many insects, while open spaces attract aerial hunters. As needs change, animals move between habitats. A safe spot today may become dangerous tomorrow when a predator discovers it. Some species are active by day, others by night, reducing certain encounters but spawning new risks. Regardless of the hour, someone is always searching for food, and even resting creatures must stay vigilant because danger never fully disappears. Large insects especially need abundant nourishment to maintain their bodies. Flight demanded an enormous amount of energy from the giant dragonflies that ruled the skies of the Carboniferous and early Permian. To hunt successfully, they needed powerful flight muscles, robust wings, and razor-sharp vision. Every failed takeoff drained their reserves, and growing weakness made each subsequent hunt less effective, creating a dangerous feedback loop. Continuous access to prey was essential for keeping their strength and daily activity levels high. These aerial predators did not hunt in isolation. Over ponds, they competed with other flying hunters for the same swarming insects, while large amphibians at the water's edge sometimes snatched prey that escaped aerial pursuit. Spiders hidden in nearby vegetation also relied on the same insects, and each successful capture by one predator reduced the food available for the others. Thus, several hunters often shared the same limited resource in a single area. The giant dragonflies were among the most successful predators of their time. Most of their lives were spent searching for food, evading danger, finding mates, and producing the next generation. Every part of their bodies was built for these tasks. Massive wings, strong flight muscles, keen eyes, sturdy legs, and a sharp mouth apparatus allowed them to seize prey with skill. Because insects needed to eat regularly, a shortage of food left them depleted, weakened, and less able to cope with the shifting environment. The atmosphere then held far more oxygen than today, letting insects grow much larger. The dragonflies took full advantage of this, their bodies receiving enough oxygen for vigorous flight.
Their huge wings carried them over forests, rivers, lakes, and swamps as they constantly scanned the air for small creatures. They rarely lingered in one spot, instead staying in motion to maximize their chances of spotting prey. Vision was their greatest weapon. Like modern dragonflies, they likely possessed enormous compound eyes that covered much of the head, each composed of thousands of tiny lenses. This gave them a wide field of view, allowing detection of a tiny insect from any direction without turning the head. Sharp sight let them judge distance, direction, and speed, while their brain processed the information in a split second. The moment prey entered view, the predator altered its flight path almost instantly, increasing the likelihood of capture before the target could escape. Quick decisions were crucial because many insects changed direction abruptly. The dragonfly had to match that speed. Their flight itself was a key advantage. Long, sturdy wings reinforced by a dense network of veins maintained rigidity and reduced damage risk. Continuous wing beats kept the flight muscles engaged, enabling long periods aloft without frequent landings. They could fly forward, turn sharply, slow down, speed up, and, when needed, hover. Hovering let them observe the surroundings almost motionlessly. The instant a target appeared nearby, they launched toward it, sometimes pursuing for a few moments before delivering the final strike. The hunt usually began the moment the Stregosas saw any movement. Its legs were built like a net for catching flying insects. The front pair stretched forward while the others folded into a basket shape, trapping the insect before it could escape. The predator clutched the victim with its legs, kept flying, or dropped onto a branch or plant. The mouthparts were another key weapon. Strong enough to crack a hard exoskeleton, the jaws pierced the prey and ate the soft tissue inside. The nutrients gained fed flight, growth, repair, and reproduction, so each successful catch restored the energy spent searching. Prey varied, but the Strigosa mostly targeted small, airborne insects because they were easier to seize. Early relatives, primitive cockroaches, and other winged bugs, filled forests and swamps, often crossing open gaps over water or between trees. Giant Strigosas watched these hotspots, waiting for insects that rested on leaves, trunks, or other surfaces.
When they noticed a motion, they shot off and attacked instantly. Sometimes they pursued insects already in flight. This required precise control of speed and direction and a keen sense of timing, as the hunter had to predict where the prey would be a split second later, not where it had just been. Likely, the Strigosa hunted throughout daylight, since its vision worked best in bright light. Sunlight made it easier to spot movement and judge distance. Dusk, rain, fog, and strong wind all reduced hunting success by hampering flight and visibility. Warm weather kept muscles efficient, while cold slowed movement and made flying harder. Heavy rain could damage delicate wings, and wind forced the insect to spend extra energy fighting the currents. In such conditions, the Strigosa rested among plants or on tree trunks until the weather improved. Forests offered many safe spots, large branches, leaves, and dense foliage that let the predator pause between flights and stay hidden from its own enemies. Rest also helped its flight muscles recover after long periods in the air. Even powerful, the giant Strigosa faced threats. In swamps, large amphibians could snap at insects that flew too close. Early reptiles, spreading at the time, probably also ate insects when they could. Big fish near the water's surface could grab a Strigosa that skimmed low or landed on a shore. The youngest Strigosas lived as aquatic nymphs. These juveniles already had strong jaws and fed on tiny fish, crustaceans, insect larvae, and other small water creatures. They hid among submerged plants, fallen vines, stones, and mud, waiting for prey. This underwater stage lasted longer than adulthood, and the nymphs grew by shedding their exoskeleton multiple times. The hard shell couldn't expand with the growing body, so it was shed several times. After each molt, the new covering stayed soft briefly before hardening, letting the organism increase in size step by step. The nymphs hunted with patience. Instead of constant swimming, they often floated still, waited for prey to come close, then struck with lightning speed. A special lower jaw shot out, seized nearby victims, and pulled them into the mouth, giving the prey no chance to escape. Yet the water was full of threats. Large fish preyed on young Strigosas, amphibians searched the same plants for food, and big insect larvae competed for the same meals, sometimes attacking smaller nymphs. Survival required staying hidden, growing steadily, and finding enough sustenance. As they grew, the young Strigosas approached the end of their underwater stage. Fully developed, they climbed out of the water using rocks or tree roots. The outer shell split, and the adult emerged. Its fresh wings were initially soft and folded, filled with body fluid until they fully expanded. Once the wings and outer covering hardened, the giant Strigos took its first flight over the water, entering a world where every day depended on skill, speed, sharp sight, successful hunting, caution, and constant awareness of opportunities and dangers.
The ancient world teemed with life across forests, rivers, lakes, swamps, and open plains. Among its inhabitants were giant insects that played a crucial ecological role. Their everyday actions, movement, feeding, laying eggs, shaped the surrounding ecosystems, influencing other organisms. Massive stracoses, millipedes, huge cockroach relatives, large scorpions, and many other arthropods were linked to their environment through predation, decomposition, locomotion, and interactions with plants and animals. During the Carboniferous period, from roughly 369 to 299 million years ago, forests spread over much of the land. Warm climates and extensive swamps dominated many regions. Dense woods of giant club mosses, horsetails, ferns, and seed ferns formed near-continuous walls, their soils littered with fallen leaves, dead stems, and broken branches. Slow-moving rivers wound through the terrain, and the swamps lingered in low-lying areas. These conditions offered insects abundant food, shelter, and breeding grounds. Each year, the forests produced massive amounts of plant material. Leaves fell, branches broke, old plants died, and new ones sprouted. The debris became vital nourishment for countless insects. As they roamed the forest floor searching for food, the giant insects helped break down dead matter, returning nutrients to the soil, which in turn supported new plant growth. Their constant movement through leaf litter, moist earth, and decaying vegetation disturbed the ground and mixed organic remains into the soil. In the ancient soils, insects tunneled through the ground, leaving channels that let water flow in and keep the earth moist. As the substrate shifted, these passages created more room for roots to spread.
Among the most notable early decomposers were huge millipedes, some longer than any modern kin. They shuffled slowly across the forest floor, munching soft, rotting plant matter and thinning the piles of dead material. Their waste, rich in nutrients, blended into the soil and encouraged new growth. Other insects preferred fresh vegetation, leaves, stems, spores, seeds, and tender tissues. Some bored holes in foliage, while others ate young shoots, directly influencing how plants grew and spread. When damage occurred, plants had to replace lost leaves or stems, a process that helped maintain a dynamic balance in the pre-dawn forests. Certain insects specialized on particular plant species, whereas generalists fed on whatever was available, spreading feeding pressure across many kinds of flora. While foraging, insects carried tiny bits of plant matter. Spores sometimes stuck to their bodies and fell elsewhere. Though flowering plants had not yet appeared, these movements still aided the distribution of some plant material. Dominating the skies were giant dragon-like predators with massive wings and enormous eyes. Their sharp mouths seized small insects both at rest and in mid-air, curbing insect populations and preventing any single species from overrunning the vegetation. Young of these hunters lived in water long before they took to the air, spending their larval years in ponds, slow rivers, and swamps. There they devoured worms, tiny fish, minute crustaceans, and other aquatic larvae, linking the water world to the surrounding forest. When they emerged as winged adults, they shifted to hunting on land and in the air. Aquatic insect larvae thrived in streams and marshes, becoming vital food for fish, amphibians, and larger water predators. As many matured and left the water, they entered the aerial food chain, providing prey for the giant sky hunters. This continual movement between water and land wove together the various parts of the prehistoric ecosystem, while early amphibians especially the large ones by rivers and swamps, relied heavily on the abundant insects, lying in wait before snapping them up in an instant. Small amphibians hunted among wet leaves and shallow water, relying on abundant insects for food, which in turn kept amphibian populations healthy. Early reptiles also fed on insects. Some hunters were active by day, others after dark, and insects emerged at different times, allowing reptiles to find prey both day and night. Certain insects searched leaf litter, while others crossed logs into dense vegetation where insects gathered. Giant insects became prey for larger animals. Their size protected them from small predators, but not from capable hunters. Early amphibians, reptiles, and other big predators attacked giant insects whenever possible, gaining valuable nutrition. When giant insects died naturally, their bodies fed small insects, worms, fungi, and microbes. The resulting nutrients entered soil and water, becoming available to plants and many other organisms, so nothing stayed unused long. Reproduction gave insects another crucial role. Adults chose oviposition sites that would provide enough food for hatchlings. Some laid eggs in moist soil, others attached them to plants or placed them near water. Aquatic insects often deposited them directly in ponds or slow streams. The chosen site strongly influenced the next generation's survival. Once hatched, larvae instantly entered the food web. Many were eaten before adulthood. Fish consumed aquatic larvae, and small land predators ate insects that fell onto the ground. Birds were still minor players, so reptiles, amphibians, spiders, and larger insects filled most hunting niches. The huge number of offspring each generation helped keep populations stable despite losses. Molting also shaped the ecosystem. As insects grew, they shed a hard outer shell several times. The empty shells remained on land or underwater, and tiny organisms sometimes fed on bits of these shed coverings, which eventually broke down and merged into the environment. Insects spent much of their lives seeking shelter among fallen trunks, dense foliage, loose bark, and moist leaf piles, protecting them from predators and harsh weather. Their movement created small tunnels and paths that other tiny animals sometimes used as refuges or travel routes. Seasonal changes dictated activity levels. During wet periods, insects moved more because food and water were abundant. During droughts, some reduced activity or searched for remaining moisture. Eggs, larvae, and adults reacted differently to these shifts, affecting the food available to predators throughout the year. The spread of giant insects across habitats, shady forests, riverbanks, lake shores, added further diversity to prehistoric ecosystems. Some insects lived mainly on the ground, while others crawled through the understory or flew above the forest canopy. Because each group used different habitats, they exploited the resources that were available to them in distinct ways. When food, shelter, or breeding sites became scarce, competition arose. Individuals hunting the same resource often met. The stronger or faster ones usually claimed the best feeding spots. To avoid direct rivalry, many species shifted their feeding times or switched to alternative foods, which reduced clashes and allowed dozens of species to coexist. Predatory insects tended to target weak, injured, small, or otherwise easy-to-catch prey. This removed the unhealthy individuals from prey populations, while the survivors escaped, reproduced, and passed on their advantageous traits. Over many generations, such selective pressure shaped the development of those populations. Wings gave large flying insects the ability to move readily between habitats. A dragonfly, for example, might hunt over a swamp one moment and then glide to another area where swarms of winged insects gathered. By traveling, The predator carried energy acquired in one place to another, either while alive or after death. Occasionally, insects also transported tiny organisms on their legs or outer shells. Spores, fungal fragments, and microscopic life clung to their bodies as they crawled through damp forest, later falling onto fresh soil or plant surfaces and spreading widely. In aquatic habitats, insect larvae fed on dead matter and hunted small underwater creatures, reducing localized organic buildup. Their waste entered the water, where microbes continued the decomposition process, keeping nutrients in motion and supporting a rich community of water-dwelling life. The presence of giant insects also drew other predators. Areas rich in insects attracted amphibians, crawling spiders, and similar hunters, which kept returning as long as food remained abundant. These predator gatherings, in turn, forced smaller animals to alter their routes to avoid becoming prey. Every insect life stage contributed its own food source. Eggs nourished tiny predators, larvae fed fish and amphibians, adults served as meals for birds, mammals, and other insects, and empty shells supported organisms that consumed residual organic material. Large insects influenced the behavior of smaller ones as well. When a big dragonfly swooped down, tiny insects often veered sharply or dove into dense vegetation. Repeated evasive maneuvers determined where insects assembled at different times of day. Spots with few predators sometimes attracted more insects until hunting pressure increased again. Throughout the day, the forest floor stayed lively. Animals constantly searched for food, mates, and shelter, stirring loose leaves and plant fragments. The minute organisms living beneath responded to these disturbances, gaining fresh nourishment or access to newly opened soil cavities. For countless ages, tiny daily actions built the structure of ancient forest ecosystems. Lush vegetation supported swarms of insects, which in turn moved plant material through the system. Dead plants fed decomposers, living plants fed herbivores, predators kept those herbivores in check, and the remains of insects returned nutrients to the soil. These linked processes ran every day in forests, swamps, rivers, and wetlands that were home to giant insects. Their reign lasted a very long time and did not end with a single catastrophe. Instead, many gradual changes across the globe reshaped the lives of the huge insects that once dominated these habitats. In the early chapters of Earth's history, giant insects flourished under favorable conditions. Massive relatives of dragonflies flew, gigantic centipedes roamed the forest floor, and other large insects lived among dense, warm, humid vegetation. Over time, the environment that allowed such size began to disappear, putting the giants to the test. During the Carboniferous period, the atmosphere contained far more oxygen than today. Scientists believe that this high oxygen level let insects grow far larger than modern ones. Insects breathe through tiny tracheal tubes that deliver oxygen directly to body parts. This system works well for small creatures but loses efficiency as size increases. When oxygen was abundant, it could reach every part of a giant's body, enabling some species to attain sizes impossible now. Over millions of years, the oxygen content slowly fell, a gradual shift, not a rapid crash. As oxygen declined, very large insects struggled to supply their bodies through their tracheal system, and natural selection began to favor smaller insects that used oxygen more efficiently. After many generations, the average size of numerous groups shrank, and the forests themselves transformed. At the height of the giant insect era, vast, swampy forests covered much of the land, populated by towering lycopsids, tall horsetails, seed ferns, and many other ancient plants. The ground stayed wet, accumulating thick layers of fallen foliage that provided food, shelter, breeding sites, and protection for the insects. Eventually, the climate changed. Some areas dried out, swamps receded, and many ancient forests vanished. New plant communities spread, displacing the old ones. Insects lost their food sources and safe nesting places. Those unable to adapt became increasingly rare. Shifts in precipitation also played a crucial role in this long-term decline. In many places that once held stable, wet habitats grew unreliable. Rivers altered their courses, lakes shrank or vanished, and areas that had supported large insect populations no longer provided enough water. Because much of an insect's life cycle depends on water, changes in rainfall directly affected their survival. Eggs could dry out before hatching, and tadpoles and larvae in ponds and streams lost their homes when the water disappeared. Over vast epochs, the climate also swung back and forth between warmth and cold. Regions that had been warm year-round shifted to different weather patterns, and seasonal differences intensified in some zones. Giant insects, perfectly adapted to the old climate, found it hard to cope with the new conditions, while smaller species could hide more easily and complete their life cycles. A second key factor in the decline of giant insects was the rise of new animal groups. Early in the era of swift aerial hunters, there were few predators. But as animal diversity grew, many new hunters appeared. Early reptiles became increasingly proficient on land, spreading into various habitats and preying on a wide range of creatures, insects among them. They moved quickly, climbed vegetation, leapt over fallen trunks, and seized insects while feeding or resting. As more reptilian forms emerged, they occupied more ground, hunting both by day and by night. This left giant insects with ever smaller windows of safe movement. Their large bodies were easy to spot, and their motions attracted hungry predators. Small insects could slip into leaves, under bark, or into soil and avoid detection. Later, flying vertebrates added further pressure. The first gliding reptiles took to the sky, hunting insects mid-air with sharp eyesight and swift flight. Their ability to chase prey over long distances made it harder for large insects, once dominant in the air, to escape. Eventually, true birds appeared. Over many generations, they refined their flight and incorporated insects into their diets, hunting from trees, shrubs, open fields, and wetlands. Their quick strikes made giant insects easy targets because of their size and visibility. Competition among insects themselves also grew. New groups spread into different environments, evolving fresh feeding and reproductive strategies. Some specialized on particular plants, others became adept predators. Some adapted to arid zones, while others thrived in forests, grasslands, rivers, and lakes. These newcomers vied for food, shelter, and breeding sites. Natural selection favored those that reproduced quickly, evaded predators, and tolerated changing conditions. Small size often gave an advantage. Tiny insects needed less food, could hide in narrow cracks inaccessible to larger forms, grew faster, and produced many offspring in a short time. As the climate kept shifting, the benefits that species possessed grew ever more crucial. Flowering plants continued their expansion, eventually covering a huge portion of the globe and producing new types of blossoms, fruits, and seeds. Insects forged tight bonds with these plants. Bees, both day and night flying butterflies, beetles, and countless flies became the main pollinators. They stayed relatively small, easily hopping from one bloom to the next, and their success showed that changing conditions could favor different body sizes. Survival also hinged on life cycles. Most insects passed through several stages before reaching adulthood. Eggs hatched into larvae that fed and grew, then transformed into adults. Each stage relied on its own food sources and environmental conditions. Any disturbance, a drought, flood, food shortage, or a surge of predators could interrupt a single stage and cause the whole population to shrink. Larger insects faced tougher demands during growth. Young giants needed ample nourishment to support their expanding bodies. Without enough food, fewer survived to adulthood, and the adults that did emerge often lacked the energy needed for successful reproduction. Environmental changes increasingly made it harder to meet these needs. Some giant insects depended on freshwater habitats in their early stages. Relatives of modern dragonflies, for example, lived as aquatic larvae before taking to the air as adults. Alterations in rivers, lakes, or swamps, warmer or colder water, shallower depths, or complete drying often halted their development. Occasional volcanic eruptions reshaped the landscape. Massive blasts hurled ash and gases into the atmosphere, sometimes altering weather over vast regions. Plants coated in volcanic ash could die, and the animals that relied on them had to adjust. Food chains rewrote themselves as species responded to the new conditions, adding extra hurdles for giant insects living near the affected zones. Over millions of years, the drift of continents played a decisive role. Once continuous land slowly broke apart, forming separate continents. Collisions of crustal plates raised mountains, while new oceans opened between land masses. These shifts rewired wind patterns, rainfall, temperatures, and ocean currents, consequently transforming habitats. Giant insects that had once roamed extensive, connected territories found themselves split into isolated pockets. Small, isolated groups were especially vulnerable. When local conditions worsened, they had nowhere nearby to move. Continental reshaping also reshaped the distribution of plants and animals. New environments emerged while old ones vanished. In some regions, forests spread. In others, they retreated, later giving way to grassy plains. Insects had to keep pace with these landscape changes. Species that could not adapt over many generations gradually lost their foothold. The fossil record confirms that many groups of giant insects faded away slowly rather than disappearing in a single moment. Different lineages declined at different times, reflecting the complex interplay of climate, habitat, and ecological relationships. Some insects survived longer than others, depending on where they lived and how well they could adapt to local conditions. Fossils in ancient rocks let scientists trace this slow process, revealing shifts in body size, wing structure, feeding habits, and distribution throughout Earth's history. Researchers examine fossilized wings, body fragments, tracks, burrows, and other remnants to learn how insects responded to changing environments. By studying the surrounding rock layers, they can date the finds and reconstruct the habitats in which these insects lived. Recent discoveries clarify why gigantic forms became rare while tiny ones continued to flourish. The loss of giants didn't mean insects as a whole lost their edge. They kept colonizing almost every terrestrial and freshwater niche. Numerous new groups appeared, each developing traits that aided survival. Some became superb flyers, others grew powerful jaws, protective exoskeletons, or specialized mouthparts for different foods. Many insects forged close relationships with plants, fungi, and animals, allowing them to persist through millions of years of environmental change.